I'm James Rosone.
And I'm Miranda Watson. We're the husband and wife writing team that created the military thriller Monroe Doctrine series and the military sci-fi series The Rise of the Republic.
We have some additional content we'd like to share with you guys today, and we hope you'll find it informative and entertaining. We're planning to create more videos similar to this in the future.
As always, please like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get started.
Chapter 13. Shocker. 3 August 1990. Dasman Palace, Kuwait City, Kuwait. Phase 1 had been swift and overwhelming, with few casualties. The only failure was to seize the emir, who had escaped south to Saudi Arabia with the rest of his family. At least his brother was brave enough to remain and die like a man, Saddam thought. As Saddam walked into the briefing room at the emir's former conference room at Dasman Palace, he was pleased to see everyone standing and waiting for him. Being a bit of a Mel Brooks fan, he recalled the famous line from History of the World Part 2, "It's good to be the king," which put a smile on his face. "Sit down and let's get started. But first," he turned to Aziz, "is Ms. Amanpour going to present our side of the story to the world?" "She is coming as we speak. I have an interview with her tomorrow in Baghdad." "Be sure she gets it right," Saddam instructed forcefully, before turning his attention to the briefer waiting to bring them up to speed. "All right, Colonel. Let's get on with it." "Yes, sir. Our task organization has not changed. All units are reporting in excellent operational readiness, as they took almost no casualties and very little vehicle damage in the execution of the mission. All units are in their positions along the Saudi border, ready to execute the next phase of the operation." "First slide," the colonel called. Several deep breaths could be heard being sucked in as their brains began to register what was being shown. "Now they will have a heart attack," the colonel thought. "As you can see, these are the enemy forces opposing us. The Saudi forces are the 2nd Saudi National Guard Brigade scattered in various outposts along our border and the Kuwaiti border, manned by part-time soldiers of the Fauj or militia. At the King Khalid military city, which is located approximately 150 kilometers from the border, is the 20th Mechanized Brigade, with some elements of the 45th Armored Brigade. At Tabuk is the 10th Mechanized Brigade, and at Khamis Mushait is the 8th Mechanized Brigade. The 45th Armored Brigade also has elements in the Riyadh area. There is also a Saudi Marine Battalion located in Dahran, near their military base, and some of the critical ports we'll want to seize right away. We anticipate that when the 2nd RG Corps moves across the border, the 8th Mech will move to oppose them in the vicinity of Jeddah. We also anticipate the Saudi 10th Mech will likely attempt to hit the flank of the 2nd RG in the vicinity of Buraida. The colonel paused momentarily to check his notes before continuing. "Sir, the Saudi National Guard is the force largely occupying many of the outposts along the border. They have a battalion at Al-Hofuf, just southwest of Dammam. They also have an infantry battalion at Al-Qasim and an infantry battalion at At-Ta'if, as well as a battalion in Buraida and Unaiza. The Saudi National Guard headquarters, which essentially exercises total command and control for the units in the field, is located in Riyadh. All 6 infantry battalions are equipped with the V-100 four-wheel armored car, which has turret-mounted machine guns. Fortunately for us, they have no tanks to support them. They do, however, have artillery. They have several battalions of towed 155mm howitzers they bought from the Americans a few years back," the colonel concluded. Saddam just waved his hand in acknowledgement. He had been familiar with the disposition of Saudi forces prior to cooking up this plan. The colonel nodded and moved on. "Next slide. Sir, our mission statement for the next phase of the operation." Mission. On order from the President, continue the attack to seize the kingdom as well as the UAE and secure the Saudi-UAE-Oman border as well as the holy cities of Mecca, Medina, and the seaport of Jeddah. Sir, Phase 2 commences on order with 1st Republican Guard Corps making the main attack south to seize Al Jubail oil refinery, the port of Dhahran, and Dammam, destroying 2nd Saudi National Guard forces in sector, and continues to attack to seize and secure the Saudi-Oman-UAE border in the vicinity of Objective 1. Block any forces attempting to leave Qatar. Pausing briefly to allow this to register with those not in the inner circle of this plan, the colonel continued. Simultaneously, 2nd Republican Guard Corps makes the supporting attack to destroy King Khalid military city and continues the attack to seize Medina, Jeddah, and Mecca. 2nd Army Corps attacks to destroy forces located at King Abdulaziz military city in Tabuk, southwest of the Jordanian border. On order turns south on the coast road to link up and follow the 2nd Republican Guard Corps. 4th Army Corps is initially in reserve and follows 2nd Republican Guard Corps. On order attacks to seize and secure Riyadh. As Saika Special Forces Division conducts waterborne assault to seize the port of Dammam and Al Jubail, conducts infiltration to seize and destroy Saudi early warning and air defense control at Prince Sultan Airfield, conducts link-up with Republican Guard forces. 9th Army Corps is initially in reserve following the 1st Republican Guard Corps and is prepared to secure Al Jubail, Dhahran, and Dammam, as well as King Fahd Airfield, continues the attack to Al Majma'a along Highway 50. Be prepared to seize Riyadh. 4th Army Corps is in reserve following the 2nd Republican Guard Corps and is prepared to assume responsibility for KKMC and Buraida on order attacks to seize Riyadh. 3rd Army Corps is in strategic reserve and continues to secure our eastern border with Iran. 7th Army Corps remains in place and is a reserve, the briefing officer said, pausing to take a drink of water. Next slide. Interrupting the colonel, Saddam asked, "And the Air Force is prepared to support each of these attacks, I take it?" He looked over at General Shala al-Tikriti, Air Force commander. "We are, sir. We have 400 fighter interceptors at 95% operationally ready today, as well as 397 strike aircraft at the same operational ready percent. We have targeted each of the 5 Saudi airfields for attack as soon as 1st Republican Guard Corps crosses the border. Our air commandos have reconned and are prepared to take out the Saudi early warning ground system, which is located at Prince Sultan Military Airfield. They were inserted by infiltration 5 days ago and are awaiting the order to execute." A few in the room were surprised that the commandos were already in place this deep inside Saudi Arabia. "What about their AWACS capability?" Saddam asked. "Sir, we intend to fly out over the Gulf in international airspace masked as a charter flight. When he realizes we are not what we appear, it will be too late for him to send a warning. And if he did, the ground station will already have been destroyed," General Shala al-Tikriti said. "How long will it take 2nd RG Corps to reach King Khalid military city?" Saddam asked no one in particular. Quickly, General Hassan al-Rawi, commander of the Republican Guard forces, answered, "From the border to the objective is 128 kilometers, and we should be there in no more than 3 hours," he answered. He looked to Lieutenant General Ra'ad Rashid al-Hamdani, the 2nd Republican Guard Corps commander, for reassurance that his answer was correct. "See to it that it does not take you longer," Saddam said, looking at the general for the first time. General Mohammed al-Tikriti just chuckled to himself, as there was no love lost between him and the Republican Guard commander. The Republican Guard forces did not dance to the armed forces tune, and this caused some resentment. The 2nd Army Corps is moving the longest distance over almost empty terrain with no good road system. How long before he reaches Tabuk, and will the 10th Mechanized Brigade be able to slip his grasp? Saddam asked. General al-Sattar al-Tikriti, the Army Chief of Staff, fielded the question. Sir, 2nd Army Corps has the longest distance to travel, with little in the way of good roads or fuel and provision capability. However, the terrain is good, with hard-packed limestone or sand being predominant, so he will be able to travel dispersed and fast. If the 10th Mechanized Brigade should venture from Tabuk and attempt to attack the flank of the 2nd RG Corps, then 2nd Army Corps will be in a perfect position to hit the 10th in his flank. We believe the 10th will be alerted to what is happening and will either retreat to Jeddah or stay in place. The Air Force will convince the 10th that they may wish to stay where they are located rather than come out and play with the close air support aircraft. Saddam seemed satisfied with that answer. Looking at the colonel, he said, "Please continue with your presentation." "Next slide," the colonel called out. "Phase 3 of the operation is on order. 4th Army Corps follows 2nd Republican Guard Corps to Az-Zulfi, and then turns south to seize and secure Riyadh and Prince Sultan Military Airfield. The 2nd Republican Guard Corps will continue its blitzkrieg attack to seize Buraida, Medina, Jeddah, and Mecca. 9th Corps is prepared to assist from Dhahran to seize Riyadh should additional reinforcements be needed." Jumping into the discussion, General Sultan al-Tikriti further explained, "Sir, Phase 3 will depend on the success of both the 1st and 2nd Republican Guard Corps and which one is meeting the least resistance and making the most progress. Speed is of the essence in this part of the operation. We will just have to be patient and see where we will meet strong resistance in or around Riyadh. The estimate is that the attack to seize Al-Jubail will take approximately 6 hours to initiate, as it is 210 kilometers from our current forces." Saddam nodded and motioned for him to continue. "Sir, we expect to encounter light resistance from the 2nd Saudi National Guard once we cross the border. Once across, Dhahran is another 80 kilometers, and we should be there by noon of the first day. The night will also favor our operation, as we have acquired a large supply of night vision goggles from a source who is providing American individual night vision devices, not the latest AN-PVS-7 version, but the older PVS-5 model, which is still superior to the Russian version," the general added. "I agree. It will be an interesting contest to see who takes Riyadh," Saddam said with a smile, as he looked first at al-Tikriti, then at al-Rawi. Changing subjects, Saddam said, "Let's talk air defense." He looked to General Hamid Raja Shalah, commander of the Air Defense Forces. He hoped he was well prepared for this. "Sir, as you know, each of our brigades is modeled after the Soviet organizational model, meaning each has a wide array of air defense weapons, to include individual shoulder-fired SA-7s, ZSU-23-4, mobile anti-aircraft guns, ZSU-57 anti-aircraft guns, SA-9 anti-aircraft missiles, and SA-6 surface-to-air missiles with each division. In addition, we are moving SA-3 launchers behind the 1st and 2nd Republican Guard Corps to increase the SAM coverage. At Ali al-Salem Air Base, we've set up an S-300 system, which will provide our ground forces substantial long-range SAM coverage as they approach Riyadh," General Hassan al-Tikriti said, before Saddam interrupted him. "You are not stripping anything out of our home defenses, are you?" "No, sir. These are launchers and missile systems the Russians recently lent to us, so the West and the Saudis will have no idea we have this level of air defense capability moving with our ground forces," General Hassan al-Tikriti declared rather proudly. "We also intend to place any captured Hawk missile batteries into operation, as we have individuals who have trained on those systems," he continued. "The Americans provided some training on them back in the early 1980s, when they thought we were going to purchase them. Part of their process of showing us how easy they are to operate." "Do you know where those batteries are located?" Saddam asked. "We do, and the 8th has already included seizing those batteries in the Al-Jubail and Dhahran area in their plan. They are under orders to capture, not destroy, the Central Command and Control Facility at King Fahd Military Complex or the facility at Prince Sultan Air Base, so we can continue to use them. Saddam nodded in satisfaction, then added, I, too, have read a lot of books about the battles and wars of the past. One thing that is always made clear is that battles and wars are won on the fighting ability of the soldiers and are lost for the lack of logistics. Tell me how we are going to support this kind of a major attack. The Minister of Defense, Sultan Hashim Ahmad Al-Tai, stood and stepped forward. Sir, we are about to seize two of the largest gas stations in the world, Al Jubail and Ras Tanura. We will seize those before they can be destroyed, with the elements of the 8th Az-Saika Marine Brigade and 3rd Special Forces Brigade on waterborne and heliborne assaults. Both of these brigades are now free, as they have completed their missions in Kuwait City. The Marine Brigade infiltrated in both locations 4 days ago as replacement workers, when several workers came down with a mysterious case of food poisoning. We also have some individuals already in both those locations that are sympathetic to the Arab cause and will ensure nothing is damaged before our forces arrive. The Soviets also provided us with several hundred 444 and 4406 fuel tankers and regular cargo trucks. These caravans of trucks will be used to establish the supply convoys needed to keep our mobile armies on the move and properly supplied during a battle. Our convoys will travel initially over Tapline Road. As for ammunition and food, that has been planned for and will follow in the supply convoys behind each corps. If need be, 2nd Republican Guard Corps as well as follow-on forces can refuel at local gas stations along his route, he said, attempting to add humor to the presentation. No one laughed. Saddam sat contemplating this information for a minute before he spoke. When he did, he turned to Abid al-Tikriti, his presidential secretary. What are your concerns at this point? Saddam asked. Sir, I have none, Abid al-Tikriti responded. No one said anything. Confidence had filled the air. After the lightning-swift seizure of Kuwait, they felt their army was primed to capture Saudi Arabia next. The Russians' Lend-Lease program really was playing out, just like they had said it would. Nodding in satisfaction, Saddam finally said, Good. We launch in the morning at 0100 hours. Let's also make sure our new international wing gets to see some action. Saudi Arabia actually has a decent air force. He stood and left the room. Chapter 14. 2nd Army Corps. 3 August 1990. 2nd Army Corps, HQ. Western Desert, Iraq. The 2nd Army Corps had been in the desert for the past 3 weeks. They had arrived from several locations along the western fringe of Iraq, and some units from as far north as Mosul and Ramadi. The long movement to get in position had taken a toll on their vehicles. For the past 3 weeks, they had been attempting to get the vehicles repaired and serviced before they were to cross the border. Everything had to be delivered cross-country, as there were no direct roads or nearby airfield they could use. This move, and then keeping them supplied, was proving to be a huge logistical nightmare. Highway 1, a 4-lane paved road that ran from Baghdad to Amman, was the only paved road in the area and vital to their cause. The region itself was remote, so few civilian vehicles traveled it. Commercial truck traffic was dominant when there was traffic. The Air Force had cleverly figured out how to use the 4-lane highway as a makeshift runway during the period of light traffic. This allowed their Antonov An-26 cargo planes to land on it so they could ferry in the most urgently needed parts and equipment to keep them running. While the cargo planes did their best to keep hauling in supplies, the Corps fuel trucks had been running non-stop to get all the vehicles fueled up in preparation for the main assault. The Corps headquarters had been located in the one town in the region, Rutba, along the Amman-Baghdad Highway, Highway 1. It had a population of 28,400, most of which worked on or for the Kirkuk-Haifa oil pipeline, which paralleled Highway 1. When the Iraqi forces had overrun Kuwait, the 2nd Army Corps commander, General Izzat al-Duri, had assembled his division commanders in his forward command post 10 miles from the Saudi border. The Saudis still hadn't been aware of what was about to happen. In front of him sat the commanders of the 2nd Infantry Division, the 14th Mechanized Division, and the 7th, 37th, and 51st Divisions. Gentlemen, tomorrow will be a great day, for tomorrow we put to the test the last 3 weeks' worth of our training. Tomorrow our soldiers will be praised through the Arab world for what they are about to do. He paused to let that sink in. OPSEC was a moot point. There were no people in the area, no roads, no telephones to call home. There was nothing, so why keep everything a secret? Gentlemen, tomorrow morning at 0100 hours, we attack into Saudi Arabia and strike the 10th Mechanized Brigade at Tabuk, he said with a broad smile. His division commanders sat in stunned silence, exchanging looks with each other. Izzat al-Duri continued, "Your operations officers are being briefed at this time by the Corps Operations Officer and receiving your assignments. We are well prepared for this action. Our vehicles have all been inspected and repaired from their long haul to get here. Every vehicle has been fueled and our tanker trucks have all been replenished. We are fully uploaded with ammunition, and close air support has been dedicated to our advance. What are your questions?" al-Duri asked. The commander of the 14th Mechanized Division asked, "Sir, what will be the order of march?" "You will be in the center of 3 divisions abreast with your T-72 tanks and BMPs. I want the 2nd Division on the right flank and the 7th Division on the left flank. The 37th Infantry Divisions will follow the 2nd Division, and the 51st will follow the 7th Division. If either the 2nd or the 7th is hit, then the 14th can turn and take on the attacker, with either the 37th or the 51st moving to close where the 14th was. Any other questions?" The room was silent as they digested what they'd just been told, and then examined some of the maps of Saudi Arabia they'd been given. Not coming up with any immediate questions, they simply nodded their agreement with the plan that had been given. "Good. You all have a lot to do, so let us be about our tasks. I will personally follow the 14th Division. Now, let us all adjourn for Asr prayers." At Aerowangon 30, al-Duri was watching to the south. The sounds of engines began to drown out all other noises. The black night showed no civilization anywhere, just an array of millions of stars in the night sky. The sound of thousands of vehicles was sure to raise some suspicions, but aside from some Bedouin sheep herders, he wasn't concerned about them being detected. The units had all crossed the border on time, which his staff had happily reported to Baghdad. He knew he had the most difficult mission, even if he wasn't in heavy contact, and didn't expect to be until morning of the next day. They had to drive over 480 kilometers to reach Tabuk. The T-72 tanks with their extended fuel tanks could make the trip, but would be very low on fuel when they arrived. They would be the priority for refueling when they reached any gas stations along the route. His logistics officer had briefed him on a plan that appeared sound, with each gas station identified along with the type of fuel each had. Respective units had been assigned which ones to stop at. This would still not be enough for the Corps, so the tanker trucks would be critical in keeping them refueled. The first town they would come to was Hazm al-Jalamid, which was along the major highway to Al-Qurayat and Jordan. From there, the divisions would continue southwest to Sakaka. Being positioned at Sakaka, they could strike the 10th Brigade if it came east. Southeast to strike the 2nd Republican Guard Corps, or al-Duri could turn west and drive right into Tabuk. By his calculations, they should be in Sakaka at about 1,000 hours. It was a 198-kilometer drive. From Sakaka to Tabuk was another 376 kilometers. This made Sakaka a critical place to seize as it had become his central supply depot to keep his corps running. If they needed additional vehicles to augment their ash and trash vehicles, they'd requisition whatever they needed. They would obviously pay for anything they had to seize, as they wanted to win the hearts of their fellow Arabs, not drive a wedge between them. The approach to Tabuk would be over loose sand, but easy for all vehicles to handle. It was just going to be a dusty trip. Everyone would be wearing their goggles and scarves to keep the dust out. This would also cause them to travel in a wider formation. But that was okay. "Sir," Alduri's operations officer said, getting his attention. The look on his face in the dim glow of the lights in the command track did not foretell good news. "What is it?" Alduri asked. "Sir, the 14th Division has reported contact. It is a Saudi National Guard unit that was quickly swept aside, but they did manage to get off several transmissions. They reported their location and approximately what they were facing." "Very well. It was to be expected. I would have preferred that it had not happened so soon. Notify the regimental air defense commanders to be prepared for possible enemy airstrikes shortly after dawn." "Do we know what type of unit our men encountered?" Alduri quizzed. "A reconnaissance unit. They were eliminated. No prisoners were taken." Chapter 15. Internationals. 4th of August, 1990. 1st Ground Attack Wing, Ali al-Salam Air Base. Major Nikolai Kamenin taxied his Zu-25 Grach onto the runway. Looking to his right, he saw his wingman was ready. They waited for the control tower to give them permission to take off. Once the order was received, they both accelerated down the runway. Halfway down the 2,989-meter-long runway, he eased the stick back. His aircraft lifted off the ground, and he began the process of clawing his way into the sky as he looked to grab more altitude. Once he was little more than 100 meters off the ground, he retracted his landing gear and started angling towards the Saudi border. He and his wingman settled into a cruising altitude of 1,000 meters and began a lazy circle that would take them close to the border, but not across it. They were waiting for the rest of their squadron to get airborne. In the distance, he saw the MiG interceptors taking off as well. Their mission was to fly out ahead of them and clear the skies of any aircraft the Saudis might try and scramble. This would provide Kamenin and his squadron the necessary cover to carry out their surprise attack on the King Khalid military city some 230 kilometers away. This preparatory attack would soften them up for the eventual ground invasion that would happen in less than an hour. "Molotok 1, this is Medved 1. You are cleared to engage. Begin your assault," came the call from Kamenin's division commander. They'd just been given the signal to begin their attack. This would be the first time their division had participated in this new war the Iraqis had started. Kamenin depressed the talk button. "All Molotok elements, proceed to your assigned target boxes and engage your targets." To minimize their radio chatter, the squadron commanders would break their target packages down into smaller engagement boxes. This way, each pilot knew that he was free to attack anything in the box without having to get permission. Fortunately for Kamenin, all the pilots in his attack squadron had 1 or more years of experience flying combat missions in Afghanistan. His pilots knew how to fly under fire and how to hit targets shooting back at you. They also knew how to operate their aircraft well in a combat environment, something they planned on showing their Iraqi counterparts. Since the fighters had flown ahead of them, there was no reason to fly low to the ground or try to evade any enemy radars. They flew at an altitude of roughly 1,000 meters towards their targets. Each Su-25 was equipped with 4 9Ku-121 Vickers laser-guided anti-tank missiles and 4 UB-32A rocket pods, each carrying 32 57mm anti-materiel rockets. The final hardpoint had been dedicated for an external fuel tank to give them a bit more time over the target. If all went according to plan, they'd plaster the hell out of the units at the facility and pulverize a lot of the tanks before they could get into the fight. As they got within 30 kilometers of the Saudi military base, they still hadn't detected any ground radars or aircraft in the vicinity. These guys have to know we're about to attack, thought Major Cumanan. The entire base was still lit up. This is going to be easier than I thought. When they got within 20 kilometers of the base, the pilots of his squadron began to split up and head to their designated target boxes, where they'd look to engage the military targets within them. Approaching 10 kilometers, Cumanan started looking for his own targets. It didn't take him long to find them either. The tank yard was fully lit up, making it easy for him to see what he was after. He spotted nicely packed rows of British chieftain tanks, arranged like they were preparing for some sort of inspection. A smile crept across his lips as he flicked on the targeting camera for his anti-tank missiles. He was going to target one tank, then flip to the next missile and get it on its way. Once he'd cycled through all 4 of them, he'd switch to his rockets and make a pass over the yard and anything else of value he saw. He knew his 57mm rockets likely wouldn't puncture the armor of the tank, but they'd certainly tear up the outside of it to include its external optical sight and potentially its tracks. Sighting in on the first tank, Cumanan depressed the pickle button, sending the first missile on its way. The missile leapt off its hardpoint, flying at Mach 1.8. It covered the distance in seconds, slamming into the tank. The heat charge caused a slight explosion before it caught the ammunition inside on fire, leading to a catastrophic explosion that ripped the turret completely off. Not dwelling on the success of his first missile strike, he lined up the next missile and fired. He got into a groove and fired off his remaining 3 missiles before his aircraft overflew the tank yard. Explosions rippled all across the facility as the other pilots in his squadron began to hit their own targets. Cumanan pulled up on the stick and applied more power to his engines. He gained altitude until he was around 2,500 meters before he turned around to line up for his next attack. He was now going to act more like a World War II dive bomber than a modern-day tank killer as he flipped over to using his rocket pods. For this first run, he was only going to use 2 of the 4 pods. Angling in for a row of barracks, he saw dozens of small figures running out of them, heading towards either their vehicles or some bunkers set up nearby. Lining up his aircraft, Cumanan let loose a string of anti-material rockets across the soldiers and then into the barracks building. He then turned slightly to come back across the tank park and emptied the remainder of his rockets into the vehicles that hadn't been hit by any anti-tank missiles. Pulling back on his stick again, he gave the plane more power to its engines, and it clawed its way back into the sky. Looking slightly behind him and to his right, Cumanan saw the base was getting torn apart. He also saw a couple of vehicle yards that had thus far escaped attention. He switched over to his remaining rocket pods and turned his aircraft towards them. As he lined up for his next attack run, red tracer rounds stabbed through the night sky towards one of his pilots. They were coming from the vehicle yard he was about to hammer with his rockets. Then a second and third vehicle opened fire on his guys. A bright flash erupted to his left, and he realized one of his aircraft had been hit by either a heavy-caliber AA gun or a shoulder-fired manpad. In either case, the plane's right engine was in flames. The pilot looked to be angling away from the target as he sought to put some distance between himself and the enemy. "I don't think he's going to make it all the way back to base," Cumanan thought. He then lined up his own aircraft and let loose a torrent of rockets across the vehicle park. He caught dozens of soldiers out in the open as his rockets rained down, exploding like firecrackers on the ground. Little pieces of red-hot shrapnel were thrown about the area, tearing into the soft flesh of the soldiers desperately trying to man their vehicles. As Cumanan pulled up on his aircraft and gave his engines more power, a string of red tracers whipped across the front of his plane. He immediately kicked his rudder left while correcting right on the stick, seeking to dodge the incoming fire. He heard a handful of the rounds slam into his armored side, and he checked his gauges. It didn't appear they had punctured the thick armor or caused any serious damage. Checking his weapons, He saw he was now dry. Well, he still had his guns. Then one of the Iraqi air traffic controllers interrupted his thoughts, alerting them that some fighters had been scrambled from an airbase a little more than 100 kilometers from them. His squadron was being recalled to Kuwait. They wanted him to rearm and prepare for the next follow-on mission. Looking down at the King Khalid military city, he felt pretty good about their first official combat mission since Afghanistan. His guys had done well. Now it was time to head home and get ready to repeat it a few more times throughout the day. I wonder if it would have been like this if we had gone to war with NATO. Nah, the NATO forces actually know how to fight, he thought, then belly laughed out loud to himself in his cockpit. Major Vitaly Popkov and his flight of 4 MiG-29s raced towards Dahran Air Base. The Saudis had stationed a squadron of F-15Cs and a squadron of Northrop F-5E Tigers at the airbase, and Popkov's flight was assigned to cover the squadron of Su-22s and Su-25s that were going to plaster the airfield. His sister squadron, flying the MiG-23s and 25s, would be flying escort duty for Iraq's only bomber assets, 3 Tupolev Tu-16 bombers and 4 Tu-22R heavy bombers. That batch of fighters and bombers was going to go after the Prince Sultan Air Base, located in the closed city of Al-Kharj, south of the capital Riyadh. Popkov wished he'd be able to see the results of that raid. The bombers were going to blanket the runways with some kind of special anti-runway ordnance, while at the same time plastering their E-3 Sentries and KC-135 tanker aircraft. Suddenly his RWR warned him that a ground radar had just detected him. Popkov reached over and turned off the buzzing noise. It'd resume if a new threat was detected. He was surprised they hadn't been detected sooner. The Saudis really were arrogant in assuming the Iraqis wouldn't cross the border and invade them next. Looking down and to his left, he knew the ground attack planes would be going in on the airbase soon. His flight of 4 aircraft had to just sit tight in a high loitering position and wait to see whether the Saudis managed to get any aircraft airborne to defend their kingdom. Popkov's radio chirped, bringing him back to the here and now. Taplia 6, Barask 6. We're approaching the airfield now. It looks like some F-5 Tigers are getting airborne. We're going to try and take the runway out now before more can get off the ground. Out. Smiling, Popkov told 2 of his pilots to stay in their high loitering position and go active with their radars. He and his wingmen were going to splash these F-5s before they became a problem. Once he'd turned his own radar on, he found 6 Tigers instead of the 2 he expected. He called his other flight of 2 fighters and told them to join the fray. They needed to down these guys before they could tear into the attack aircraft. Spotting 1 pair of F-5s racing out across the desert, he maneuvered his MiG to come up behind the F-5, roughly 18 kilometers ahead. He knew that his MiG-29, Stridge, totally outclassed the Tiger in speed and acceleration. On the other hand, the nimble little F-5 could maneuver inside his MiG if this turned into a low-speed turning duel. He turned on the seeker head for his R-73 missile and waited until it told him it had successfully locked onto the aircraft he was painting. Do these pilots not realize I'm targeting them? They aren't even moving to evade. With a solid lock, he depressed the pickle button and let the missile fly. While that missile took off, he switched over to his next R-73 missile to allow the seeker head to acquire its lock. Even with the Tigers running directly away from Popkov, there was a closure rate of over Mach 1. This meant it would be less than a minute before he overtook his prey, if the Tiger didn't change course. The second Tiger, however, did take evasive maneuvers. He rolled to the left, pulled hard on his stick, and appeared to light up his afterburner. Popkov could recognize a panic maneuver when he saw one. With the MiG flying above and behind it, the Tiger pulled to his left. The rate of closure increased dramatically. With no time to get the missile lock, Popkov switched to guns and let loose a stream of 30mm rounds. The angry burst fell behind the turning tiger. Popkov knew that he didn't want to tangle with the tiger down here. Even if he got the kill, he would put himself in a vulnerable position for the next enemy plane who decided to take on the Stritch. Instead of following the enemy, he eased the stick back and put some altitude between himself and the tiger. He knew that his two RD-33 engines would give his MiG a major advantage in the vertical over the relatively anemic engines on the F-5. At the apex of his climb, Popkov pulled his MiG into a gentle left-hand turn. During the entire maneuver, he never took his eyes off the enemy plane. He dipped his wing a few degrees to keep it in view, so that on the descent, he could easily gauge where the enemy plane would be when he would get the lock with the infrared seeker on his R-73. The frightened tiger pulled out of his flat, turned to the left, rolled quickly to the right, and tried to dive out of Popkov's sight. It was no use. The tiger had bled off all its speed, and with the MiG now diving on it, there was nowhere for the man to go. Once Popkov heard the tone of the missile lock, he loosed his second R-73 of the day and pulled out of his dive, being sure to keep his G-forces down to preserve his energy while he scanned the skies for any new enemy aircraft. As he raised his nose and extended out of his run, Popkov looked around to see where the rest of his pilots were and how the aerial battle was shaking out. Judging by what he saw on his radar, 3 of the 6 F-5s looked to be down. The remaining Saudi planes appeared to be running, probably a smart move considering how outmatched they were against the MiGs. Then again, a plane is only as good as the pilot flying it, and right now, not all of these Iraqi squadrons were being flown by Iraqis. This left Popkov with a tactical dilemma. He didn't like having those airborne threats out there, but he also didn't want to detach any of his planes to chase them down. For all he knew, the whole point of that Tiger launch was to pull the fighters away from the strike planes. No, he'd have to keep his eyes out for their return. If they came back, he'd deal with them then. Angling his aircraft to head towards the Saudi airbase, he saw columns of black smoke rising from a number of different positions on the base. A few minutes later, he got a call from the mission commander for the ground attack planes. They were returning to base to rearm and see what the Iraqis wanted them to do next. Popkov and his flight of 4 MiGs would continue to loiter over Saudi Arabia for another 45 minutes until the next flight from their squadron arrived. Since this was the first day of the new invasion, the Iraqis were having their Russian contractors fly near constant fighter patrols over the battle space. They wanted their ground attack planes to focus on taking out Saudi airfields. As far as Popkov was concerned, this was going to be easy duty unless the Americans decided to join the fray. Then they'd be in for a real fight. Chapter 16. Over they go. 4 August 1990. 1st Republican Guard Corps. Southern Kuwait. Brigadier General Ra'ad al-Hamdani pulled a cigarette out, and his aide struck a match. In the pitch-black night, the match was a beacon. Al-Hamdani looked south at the glow on the horizon. Al-Jubail was totally lit up with lights, as well as burning discharged gas, so that was reassuring. The Saudis still appeared not to be expecting them. A reconnaissance team reported that Khafji, the first town across the Saudi border, was very dark except for a few lights. At Ora 100 hours, he did not find this particularly unusual. His headquarters was located in Al-Nuwaisib, with the 1st Battalion on the right, 2nd Battalion on the left, and 3rd Battalion in reserve. Somewhere overhead, he heard the sounds of jet engines. Not 1 or 2 jet engines, but a host of them. He smiled, knowing these warplanes had just crossed the border and were even now on their way to destroy the Saudi Air Force on the ground and go after some of their tank units while they were still in garrison. Time to issue final instructions to the battalion commanders. Turning to the 1st Battalion commander, he ordered, "I don't want you to get bogged down in Khafji, so concentrate on the highway. Any resistance we get from Kafji, the follow-on forces can address. Understood? He added. And keep the highway open. If you lose a vehicle, shove it off the road. We can deal with it later. We need those highways to stay clear and open. Yes, sir. Speaking to his 2nd Battalion commander, General Al-Hamdani explained, You may have a problem with the ground on the right flank. The interchange at Kafji appears to have a large area of flooded ground. Our reconnaissance people say it is likely too soft for your vehicles. Avoid that by swinging out west of the power lines to this hamlet west of Kafji, then parallel the highway south. The two looked briefly at the map to see what Al-Hamdani was referencing. Understood? Yes, sir. If I may, who is on our right flank? The commander asked pensively. That will be 18th Armored Brigade. You must always maintain contact with them. Your forces are going to be traveling in close proximity to each other, and I do not want you accidentally shooting at each other. Also, let me know if they are falling behind or getting ahead of us. The 8th and 9th Mechanized Brigades will follow us and take care of any bypassed positions. Again, do not get bogged down in a slugfest. The Nebuchadnezzar Mechanized Division will be on their right flank, with the Al-Madina and Tawakkalna divisions following behind us, and the Nebuchadnezzar. The general paused for just a moment to allow his commanders a chance to digest the information he had just given them. He then continued with their final instructions, addressing the 3rd Battalion commander. Remember, 3rd Battalion will follow the 1st Battalion, and I want you to send 1 company to Ras al-Mishab Airport. We need to make sure there are no military forces there. We've also been tasked with making sure we provide a quick assessment of any airfields we overrun. The Air Force wants to set up more forward air bases until we capture some of the larger ones and get them operational. If your company discovers some forces at this particular field, assess if they can take them out. If they can't, then report it, and we'll let a follow-on unit handle it. Any questions? The battalion commanders gave him a resounding, "No, sir." These officers knew their jobs, and they knew what had to be done to achieve their objectives. Good. It appears it's time to get this show going. Return to your units and call me when you are ready. We cross at 0200 hours. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, they all shouted in unison. If God willed them to be successful in this coming war, then they would be. If not, well, then they'd try hard to convince him that they should be. As the subordinate commanders returned to their respective battalions, Al-Hamdani thought about his own family. He had been just a young captain when the war with Iran had broken out. For 8 years, he had been on the front lines. When he had seen his first human wave attack, it had truly terrified him. How the opposing generals could just throw so many of their men against fixed defenses as they had done, and, worse, suffer the kind of losses they had blown his mind. He'd vowed that if he ever became a general one day, he would not needlessly throw away the lives of his men like that. The Iranians were truly fanatical fighters, long on bravery and short on tactics or equipment. He did not think the Saudis would be anything like that. The Saudis might be rich and able to purchase the best military hardware available, but they seldom liked to get their hands dirty. They liked to use their wealth to hire others to do that kind of dirty work for them. Al-Hamdani wondered how that would work in a war. Then his mind drifted back to the thought of home. Maybe when we secure our objectives, it will be possible for me to get some time off and go home and see my family in Basra. His train of thought was broken by his operations officer. "Sir, it's time. May I give the official order?" Al-Hamdani could sense the man's excitement, so he nodded in the affirmative. The command track he was standing beside started its engine, as did all the other vehicles in the command post. They were ready to roll, and so was he. Al-Hamdani went over to his command vehicle with its 4 radios and listened as his commanders reported in. He decided he wanted to move up closer to the front and told the driver to move out. Although he was only 5 miles behind the lead elements that would charge across the border, He wanted to position himself between the 1st Battalion and 3rd Battalion. He believed that a commander should lead from the front and insisted that the commanders follow his example. As he drove past the 3rd Battalion commander, he exchanged salutes and wide grins of excitement with the tanker commanders and those standing up through the vehicle hatches. It was an exciting moment, and one he wouldn't soon forget. Soon, the first reports from the front began to come in. His lead company rolled over the Al-Khafji customs house with no resistance aside from the surprised looks on the customs officials' faces. As they continued down the highway, they came to an equestrian riding facility. It seemed kind of odd and out of place in such an arid desert area, but the Saudis had money to build such niceties where they wished. The horses paid about as much attention to them as the Saudi customs officials. The College of Education, Khafji campus, was blacked out, and he suspected the students were asleep or too frightened to come out. Looking off to his right through his night vision goggles, he could make out some tiny lights from IR chemical sticks they had acquired for this very purpose. Each vehicle had one tied to each antenna to identify the vehicle as friendly. As they continued south, he checked his watch. They were right on schedule, and not a shot had been fired at them. This is almost too good to be true. Looking to the right, he wondered how things were going for the 2nd Republican Guard Corps. General Raad Rasjod, the 2nd Republican Guard Corps commander, had met with his division commanders earlier in the evening to discuss last-minute details for the pending attack. He'd made it very clear that no one was to enter the neutral zone before 0200 hours. Despite his orders, in their enthusiasm and vigor, a reconnaissance team had done so, going so far as to actually cross into Saudi Arabia. This matter would have to be dealt with, but now was not the time. They had returned before they had been detected by the Saudi border guards, but that did not absolve them of the consequences of disregarding his orders. Of more pressing concern was the terrain that the Corps would be attacking over. General Al-Khab, I want you to take advantage of this 4-lane highway from Tapline Road to King Khalid Military City. You are also going to have to watch that you do not get too far ahead of General Al-Karawi's division. He has more difficult terrain to cover than we do, and if you get too far ahead, you'll leave your flanks exposed, which could spell disaster, General Raad Rasjod explained forcefully. Al-Khab nodded at the logic, but didn't say anything. General Rasjod continued. What brigade will be on your left flank? He was asking some of these questions about other units and their locations because he wanted to make sure they stayed abreast of what was going on around them. Sir, that will be the 4th Brigade, General Al-Khab answered quickly and confidently. Smiling at the ready answer, Rasjod added, It's imperative that he isolate Al-Qaisuma with one of his battalions. If you want, the 6th Brigade can replace him with a battalion or however you want to do this, but I want to be sure that the left flank is protected. Nothing can be assumed or left to chance. Do you understand? Yes, sir. It will be done, General Al-Khab assured him. I would like both of you to arrive at your final objectives at the same time, or even let him overtake it, General Al-Karawi indicated. If he arrives a bit earlier, they will turn against him and present you with a flanking attack that your tanks and BMPs can exploit. Either way, I need both of you in the fight, and not one piecemeal engagement after another. Am I clear? General Raad Rasjod emphasized before quickly adding, I will expect updates on your progress at the appropriate phase lines, and be prepared to slow down or speed up, depending on the situation and how the enemy is reacting. The general took a breath in, and then looked off into the distance for a moment before returning his gaze to his most aggressive general. Al-Karawi, your division is going to want to slide to the left, seeking the good road. It's smoother and faster, but do not let it happen. Hold on your axis of advance and turn to the left only when you have reached that point due west of King Khalid Military City. That will force the enemy to fight in 2 directions, or turn towards you and present his flank to the Baghdad division. He paused as he looked at the map spread before him. Now, one more point. I would like to take King Khalid Military City with as little damage as possible from our end. The Air Force is flying in as we speak to go after their tank and vehicle yards. They may even go after some of the barracks. Additionally, the Air Force has been told not to just outright destroy the base. They are mostly going after the tanks and armored vehicles that might challenge. General Al-Karawi smiled at the mention of the Air Force going in ahead of them. There had been many questions by the Army about what role the Air Force would play. They were not exactly known for providing the best close air support to their service. There were also rumors of a mysterious wing of pilots operating some pretty advanced aircraft that had been lent to them by the Soviets. Rasjod had his own suspicions about who was flying those planes, but he wasn't about to go asking. Al-Karawi, when I attended the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College in 1979, the Saudis and we were better friends. They had even invited many of us to attend the course at King Khalid. I suspect it was meant to impress us with their army at the time. While we were there, we studied a book written by a famous Prussian general, Karl von Clausewitz. In that book, On War, he professed that the most successful battles are won by maneuver and not butchering each other as we did with Iran. So that is what I want us to do. I want us to show an overwhelming force to those at King Khalid Military City, so that they will realize that it would be futile to oppose us. I also do not want to endanger any of their families that live there, which will just give them an incentive to fight harder. When you get within 10 kilometers of your objective, I want you to stop and bring all your artillery forward for a firepower demonstration. Hopefully, when they see the amount of artillery we have brought, they will surrender. Any questions? Al-Karawi just shook his head. He knew what was being asked of him and the trust being bestowed upon him. He wouldn't let his superiors down. Hours later, as the divisions entered the neutral zone, the night was as dark as any they'd ever had. Millions of stars clearly showed where the horizon was, with the absence of light demarcating where the sky and ground touched. It symbolized a giant black hole and the unknown outcome into which their forces would be advancing. As the divisions of the Iraqi army advanced across Tapline Road, there was no vehicle traffic or signs of human presence anywhere. On the left, the Baghdad Mechanized Division rolled up on the highway as the 4th Brigade and the 5th Brigade moved into the Wadi al-Batin proper. The 4th would have to take a slow approach, as the 5th had to pick its way over the uneven ground. The 6th Brigade was in reserve following the 4th and was just crossing into Saudi territory when the 4th crossed the Tapline Road right on time. On the right flank, the Adnan Motorized Division had 2 brigades advancing, with 1 brigade acting as their reserve following slightly behind them. The 21st Armored Brigade was in reserve with their T-72 tanks, while the forward brigades had the faster-moving BTR-80 vehicles. The 8-wheeled vehicle was ideal for this desert terrain. With its crew of 3 and 14 soldiers, it could rush infantrymen right into the battle. The newer BTR-80 was also equipped with a much improved turret, outfitted with both a 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun and a 7.62mm PKT machine gun. The additional 7.62mm PKT coaxial machine gun would handle any personnel threats, while the 14.5mm could tear apart anything but a frontline tank. General al-Hamdani knew that the 1st RG Corps would be the ones first detected once they crossed the border, and when that happened, the forces opposing his advance would be alerted. He would be in for a fight, for sure. His immediate concern was not the fight for King Khalid Military City, but being surprised by the 10th Mechanized Brigade hitting one of his flanks after he took King Khalid and began moving again. I hope the 2nd Army Corps is moving.
Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss another video.
In the meantime, we have plenty of reading material to keep you busy. You can find it all on our website, Frontline Publishing Inc. audiobook.com.